ahead, making the most of your museum shop. And as Katrina said, there'll be an opportunity after each section. There are 5 sections to ask questions and also hopefully to share your experiences as well. I think what's great about this sector is that there is this learning between us. I think we're really, really good at that. I also don't know how experienced you are, so it's a general presentation, but I'm hoping whether you're new to retail, new to museum retail, or whether you're an old hack at it, that you'll be able to take something away from today's session. And I also don't know how many of your museums have reopened. Some, I think, perhaps are still closed, so there might be a few tips here for you as well. So the 5 sections we're going to cover today are the 5 Ps under my retail rainbow. The first is performance, so measuring KPIs. Then we'll go on to presentation and visual merchandising, a little bit about product sourcing and promotions, and then customer service and a Q&A at the end. So thinking about performance, we need to measure our KPIs, our key performance indicators. And I think what's important is not so much that we get hung up about how we're performing against other visitor attractions. You do hear lots of information in the sector about spend per head should be X in a free to enter museum and Y in a paid entry museum. But I think the important thing is that we're measuring against our own performance so that we're always improving. We also need to monitor our performance to take action and motivate our retail team, and to manage our stock, manage our purchases and our markdowns. And whether you record those figures daily, weekly, monthly, depends really on your commitment, you know, the amount of time that you have on your project, on managing your shop. Certainly for my sites, I check them daily, but you'd expect that, of course. I think also keep a calendar of events that may have influenced sales. Obviously at the moment, we all know what's affecting our sales, but thinking about an example, one of the sites I manage in London, we depend very much on visitors to a cable car that goes over the Thames. And when there are high winds, of course, the cable car shuts and we don't get any visitors to our site. So I need to take that in, or bear that in mind when I'm looking back on figures and using those to forecast forward trends. We need to set targets, again, so that we can monitor our performance. And also I think it's really important to get feedback from the shop floor. You might be the person on the shop floor, but if perhaps you're the retail manager and you've got staff on the shop floor, you're not there all the time. It's really important to get feedback. Something that happened to me a couple of weekends ago, I logged on a Saturday and to look at the sales figures, and I honestly thought that I'd put in a range of dates. I thought I must have put in the week's figures because the takings that day were fantastic. And I thought, oh heck, you know, am I going to run out of stock? Is this a trend? But I drilled down into it, spoke to the shop floor manager that day, and we had 2 customers who made very large purchases between them. So that was really useful information to know. So I think with the impact of COVID-19, it's never been more important to closely monitor our KPIs so that we can take action over stock and sales. I think also our KPIs depend a lot when we're looking at spend per visitor on how we measure the number of visitors. So our spend per visitor is the sales that we make divided by the number of visitors. But it's important how we measure those visitors. So again, thinking of an example at one of my sites, we've become a destination shop in itself, and we also have a cafe. But when we measure our spend per visitor, we count the visitors as visitors who've bought a ticket to see the exhibition. So clearly our spend per visitor is much higher than if we were measuring the people that actually came in through the front door. So whatever you do, make sure that it's consistent. And again, in general, it's thought that there's a higher spend per visitor when people have paid to visit the museum. And I think, you know, we can all agree that's more likely to be the case. The impact of COVID-19, I think, in fact, secondary spend across the sector appears to be up. Although there's a general drop in the number of visitors to museums, those that have made the effort to go, they really want to be there. They've often had to pre-book a ticket, and this is leading to an increase in spend per visitor and an increase in the average transaction value. And I think also the way we can benefit, if you like, from what's happened is that there's been an increase in visitors or customers wanting to shop local. I've been to a couple of shopping centres recently, and they really are very quiet. And I think it does give visitors, when they're in your attractions, in your museums, if they see something and they're looking for a gift, it gives them an opportunity to buy something without them having to go to the shops, as it were. So one of the other KPIs we look at is conversion rate. So this is how many transactions do we achieve from the number of visitors that we get. And to increase our conversion rate, we need to ensure that the product is relevant, make sure that it reflects the museum collection or the exhibitions, or perhaps your building, if you've got a particularly interesting building, perhaps your site is the key interest there, or the location perhaps. And also think about current trends. I think there's a trend for sustainable and definitely for locally sourced products. We need to ensure that our product is relevant to our visitor demographic, and we need to consider the position of the shop and visitor flow. So you've probably all heard exit through the gift shop is the ideal scenario. It's not always possible, depending on your site layout, for that to be the case, but it's definitely worth considering. And I was on a webinar the other day with ACE, the Association for Cultural Enterprises, and there was quite an interesting example there from the Sainsbury Centre, where because of the adaptations they've had to make to visitor flow, they've turned one of their education studios into a pop-up shop, so the visitors going through the exhibition have to visit the pop-up shop on the way out. And I think they've learned something from that experience about how important it is to have the shop in the right position. They've noticed an increase in sales from that. We need to draw the attention of visitors to the presence of a shop and ensure great customer service, which we'll touch on later. But also I think it's how busy is the shop. Shoppers are influenced by others. We do need a critical mass. And up until recently, I've always encouraged staff to mingle with shoppers, especially if the shop's particularly quiet, because it can give an air of busyness if you have staff mingling in the shop, perhaps sorting out shelving or stocking, topping up. Perhaps that's not quite so easy now. I think the impact of COVID-19 is that we do need to make sure that shoppers feel completely safe in the environment, with plenty of room to navigate the space, that might mean that you have to take away fixtures or have some kind of route laid out on the floor if you think that would be helpful. But the National Gallery are reporting that conversion levels have never been higher, and average transaction value and spend per visitor are hitting record levels, albeit with less visitors overall. So I think it's not all doom and gloom. One of the other KPIs to look at is the average transaction value, the ATV. I must say as well, it's not always easy to measure all these KPIs. It will depend very much on the till system you've got. But I think it's worth measuring as many as you can. So we can increase our average transaction value by customer service, I think definitely by upselling or helping customers make a decision about what they want to buy if perhaps they're indecisive. Think about your till point, having impulse buys there, perhaps chocolate or postcards. Think about combining compatible products as well. So for instance, at one of my museum sites, we've got a big feature going on at the moment about bees. So we have our honey displayed with books for children about bees and also cards from a local designer with bees. So if somebody's buying one of those gifts as one of those products as a gift, then they're probably going to buy a matching card. If you're selling face masks, which certainly we're selling well, then you could put those at the till point. That could be useful for people who've forgotten to bring theirs. And in terms of average transaction value, some sites have reported an increase of 100%. This was Chester Zoo, actually again on the same webinar last week from ACE. And theory is that visitors are prepared to spend, they haven't been on holiday, so they're spending on a day out, and there's a pent-up demand. And I've certainly noticed in one of my sites that children's toys are selling particularly well, so perhaps parents want to treat their children. We all need to be looking at profit. So sales minus the cost of sales is our gross profit. And if you're not doing so already, I would encourage you, certainly on wholesale products, to try and achieve always at least 2.4 markup on the cost price of your lines. But what you might want to do is actually look at a product and think, you know, what will my customer pay for this? So if perhaps you have a £5 product but you think it looks as if it's worth more than £12, then don't hesitate, put the price up. Unfortunately, from our gross profit, we have to cover our overheads, and some of those are, for instance, gift wrap and packaging. Some of you, I think, already use these, but if you are affiliated with the Art Fund, they do supply free paper carrier bags, which is a fantastic incentive to have those branded carrier bags. I think they do that once a year, so you could get in touch with them. There are costs of labelling, staff costs, theft of stock, so it's important in your shop that you have good sight lines from the cash desk to all areas of the shop, and be particularly mindful of keeping your valuable stock nearer the till point, and also try and reduce the amount of damaged stock. I think stock rooms can be particularly vulnerable if you've only got a tiny space for storing your stock. Then it can be easy to get things all swashed up, and unfortunately those items can't then be sold. What is interesting, I think a lot of sites are turning to cashless, and there are clearly some advantages to that. There's going to be less staff costs because they're going to free up the resource of staff they're not going to be having to count cash. On the other hand, if you have a lot of school children coming in the future, it might be that you want to start taking cash again. Otherwise, those children won't be spending in your museum shop. Thinking about markdowns, they're part and parcel of retail, sadly. We all make buying mistakes. Sometimes things just don't sell as well as we hope they would. And perhaps they're no longer relevant. Perhaps the exhibition's been and gone. As I say, we all do make mistakes. I was at the V&A just about 3 weeks ago, and it's not so much a mistake, but they have clearly got a large stock of biscuits in tubes, as you can see in the photograph, and they've got a short shelf life. So they've all been marked down, I think, to half price. Remember that items don't improve with age. So if you've got those items lurking in your stockroom, then do start clearing them out, because it frees up budget for new lines. And learn from the mistake. Why didn't the item sell? And, oh, I missed a bit there. Be wary of buying in too much bulk to get a high margin. There are, obviously it's the supplier is vested in encouraging you to purchase larger quantities and often will give you a discount to do so. But think realistically before you commit, how many of these are we really going to sell? So check your use-by dates of perishable items and mark them down to clear or reprice them if you're overstocked. Few ideas of moving slow selling lines. I would say cut the price deep from the beginning to clear. I don't think offering 5–10% off here and there is really going to incentivize somebody to buy something. Yeah, so I would definitely cut deep from the beginning. Maybe bundle stock together. So if you've got a range of postcards, some of which aren't selling as well, perhaps sell them in packs. Buy one, get one free. Make it clear the item is reduced. Normally, I would encourage you to label products on the back of items or on the bottom. But I think when it comes to sale stock, it's probably better to label on the front to make it clear that the item is reduced. And don't display all your sale stock at the front of the shop on the whole. I mean, obviously, if it's a big sale, then yes, you might do. But I think just keep those sale items towards the back of the shop. And again, this photograph is from the V&A. They've got these beautifully packaged seeds, and they've obviously missed the seed growing or seed planting season, and they're selling all their seeds off for just £1 a pack. So how much stock do we need? Well, our sales forecast should determine the amount of stock we need. And we usually work this out on a calculation called weeks cover. So how long will our current stock last if we weren't to buy any more before we ran out? And on average, about 13 weeks cover is a good cover to aim for. But in a small museum where you've got perhaps low turnover, it's possibly likely to be more like 26 weeks cover. Stock turn is another way of measuring weeks cover. If you've got 13 weeks cover, that means you've got a stock turn of 4. So how many times during the year would you turn that stock over? So it's 52 weeks divided by 4 is 13. And stock holding will change depending on the product. So perhaps postcards, when you buy those in bulk, for instance, or your guidebook, obviously you'll have more than 13 weeks stock, 13 weeks cover in stock. Another terminology is open to buy, and that's the difference between the required stock holding and the actual stock. So I think the impact of COVID-19 is that we do need to regularly review our sales forecast and adjust our stock levels accordingly. So it's exciting for retail at the moment. Christmas is coming, and I did a calculation. There are 86 shopping days till Christmas, and we're now in what we call the golden quarter. So retail really does depend on Christmas trading. I was listening to You and Yours on Radio 4 last week, and they were talking about Christmas retailing. And apparently Sainsbury's sold 1.5 million mince pies last week, and Argos 1,000 Christmas trees already. I certainly know at one of my sites that advent calendars and calendars have been selling since early this month, and in fact we've sold out of advent calendars already, and we're now on our second delivery, and it's this lovely calendar by Angela Harding from Art Angels actually. So if you're not, I would suggest you start displaying your Christmas stock now, as people really are planning ahead and buying early. I was shopping at the weekend in a gift shop in Anthropology in Guildford, and I heard people talking about buying for Christmas, and actually they were buying then. So I think it really is happening earlier this year. I understand that, you know, people are going to be worried about whether shops will be closed, and also they won't want to be in the crowds like we're used to. You might want to ask your supplier if they would consider Christmas cards on sale return, perhaps if you're nervous yourself about another lockdown and are nervous about committing stock, then do have those discussions with your supplier. So that's the end of section 1. So I think it's time for any questions on that topic.
Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Alison? I was just going to follow up on what you said just now, Alison, about sale or return. That seems like a really good option for small museums if you can get your suppliers to do sale or return. Any good tips about how you how you approach that conversation?
Well, I think that some suppliers do offer it already. I know, well, they certainly were doing it. Cans Down Press, who have lovely greetings cards, they certainly last year were doing their Christmas card packs on sale or return, and you had to pay a small amount. I forget how much it was, but if you return the cards, you would get a refund, but you would have to pay a repackaging cost per pack of cards. But I think it was only pence. So that's one option. We didn't have to take them up on it because we sold out, apart from one design, actually. And I think of however many packs we bought with that one design, we only sold one. And that kind of goes back to what I was just saying about we all make mistakes. You know, the supplier range in general was fantastic, but that card was the right one. And later on, actually, in the presentation, I do say, oh no, actually I've said it already, haven't I, about look and see why, you know, why hasn't something sold? And I can see now why it is. The design's lovely, but the background of the design is black. And I suppose who wants to give a black card at Christmas? You know, perhaps that's obvious. I don't know. It wasn't to me at the time, but maybe I won't make that mistake again. And certainly I haven't bought that design again this year.
I've got another question here from Rebecca. So what's a good stock turn? What should museums be aiming for in their stock turn?
I think a stock turn of 4, so 13 weeks cover is the ideal. But I do appreciate that is, when you've got low turnover, it's harder to achieve that sort of stock turn.
And then the other question here we might say for product sourcing, actually, it's about commissions for jewellery and craft. So shall I save that for when we get on to section 3?
Yes, okay. Shall we move on to presentation? Okay. So I think impressions really do count, and I would encourage you all to have a daily checklist of cleaning and decluttering, especially around the till point. I know what happens. It's so easy to gather information, leaflets, all sorts of detritus at the till point, but it's really important to keep it clutter-free. Couple of illustrations here. They're both the same, actually. It's the same desk. So the first one was pre-declutter, and the second one obviously is post. And I think it just speaks volumes in itself. It just looks like a much more professional environment. Keep the till area on brand. So perhaps if you are still taking cash and you have a donation box, have a themed donation box. Display a small selection of your impulse purchases there, whether that's your tote bags, your chocolate or your face masks. And do ensure that all your staff and your volunteers have a branded lanyard or a badge to easily identify them to visitors as representing the organisation. And I think it's never been more important, actually, for shopper confidence that the environment appears fresh and clean. So make sure you've got your hand sanitizer around. And then I think people are used to going into the supermarket and picking up stock. So as long as there's hand sanitizer around, people know that that stock is as clean as it can be. But obviously you can help people feel confident and safe by being seen to be regularly cleaning too. Think about a logical layout for your shop. Maybe just when you're in there next time, think, you know, does this make sense? Do I need to move things around? So what I'm thinking about there is perhaps not having children's toys next to your more academic books, for instance. Think about zoning as well. So again, having clear zones of perhaps children's toys together and perhaps your craft items in a separate section. Think about props as well. Are there any props that you could use to enhance your displays? Think about lighting, particularly when it comes to jewellery, I would say. That's particularly important, but lighting in general can really make a difference to how products appear. And I've mentioned sight lines as well. This photograph, and I don't know if any of you will recognise it, is actually the V&A shop at the moment. So if you're familiar with the V&A shop, it's huge, it's vast. But what they've had to do is, because their visitor numbers are so low, is they've partitioned half of it off and cleared the shelves completely of stock. So now it's just half the size it was. So you might feel that you need to remove some fixtures as well, perhaps if your visitor numbers are low and you feel that you haven't got enough stock to make the shop look full. So you know, perhaps think about removing some fixtures, or if you've got bare shelves, take the shelves away and fill the space with a graphic about the museum perhaps. So we've really got to adapt. I've mentioned already about Sainsbury Centre having a new pop-up shop. Perhaps there are other opportunities for you to take your merchandise off-site. There are quite a few craft fairs carrying on at the moment, I know, so perhaps you could think about having a pop-up shop in your high street, even if your museum was shut. And Chester Zoo actually mentioned in this webinar that they've created a new one-way shopping route, and they've had to adapt the merchandise displays to fit that new one-way shopping route, simply to make sure that if visitors missed out on perhaps one of the best sellers at the beginning of the route, they would then be able to see it later on in the route. So they've repeated their stock throughout the route, which is a really clever idea. Displays, think about creating a focal point or a feature display, and plan a calendar of displays, so based on events, themes and the season. Re-merchandise the shop regularly to encourage repeat visits. I think if your stock doesn't change very often and you are getting repeat visitors, then you need to move things around, because things do look different once you redisplay them. And think about reflecting the audience. So perhaps during school holidays, move your toys to a more prominent position. And also, when you're doing your product ordering, think about how you're going to display each item effectively. Certainly at one of my museums, sadly, we do have a problem with being able to display 2D works, and that really limits what we order. So I have to make sure that I limit how many prints I order, or at least when I do order them, think very carefully about if I've got space for them and where they're going to go. Think about product packaging. Does it enhance or cheapen the product? I was helping a site recently set up for a new shop opening, and I'd asked for all the stock to be pre-labelled, which it was, but there were some mugs that came in just a cardboard box, and they'd been priced underneath as if they were going to be sold in that packaging. But really the packaging didn't do anything to enhance the product. So we took all the mugs out and just priced each mug individually, and obviously kept the packaging for when customers bought the mug. Remember, eye level is buy level. And also do place your best sellers in a prominent position and in repeat positions around the shop. Don't feel that you only need to limit them to one place. I think with what's going on at the moment, I would definitely remove any sample products you have, hand cream, lip balm, any mouth toys, those sorts of things are just a no-no. So take those off. Soap samples, for instance, as well. And certainly we're keeping all our textiles, all our scarves, excuse me, in their wrappers, apart from just the display samples. So I think that gives people confidence as well. A few quick tips about displays. Things do on the whole look better in odd numbers, so the rule of threes, so 3s and 5s is always a good number to think about. Think about heights of displays as well, so try not to keep everything at too low a level. And you can use props and risers to give height to displays. Think about triangular grouping. Triangles always work well, and I think both these images show that off to good effect. You get a sort of pyramid shape. You can always use simple repetition or colour and get creative. So get inspired. And I find now I can't even go to the supermarket without looking to see how they're displaying products. Waitrose, for instance, they always have a themed seasonal display at the entrance to our local shop. And I think we can all learn from high street retailers. You know, obviously they've got display teams, marketing teams, and we can take little tips from them. A little slide of shame. I think, you know, all of us could probably have another look at our shop, just looking at the shop with fresh eyes. So, you know, have you got things tucked away behind doors that perhaps you think visitors can't see, but they can? I'm not a fan of selling things from the floor, really. I think they're a trip hazard and they can look scruffy. For instance, the slide in the bottom right, they've actually got plenty of empty space on the shelf, but they're selling things from the floor. So I think there's room for improvement there. And make sure that your shelves are replenished often. The shop illustrated top right, they didn't really like putting books out apart from a display copy. And I would encourage you to put buying copies out as well. Another example here of a museum I worked with who had a book that was connected with the museum. They'd had them printed, they had hundreds in stock. The retail price was £20, and the comment was, oh, we put them on the top shelf because we never sell them. And what we did was we rearranged the shop, and in doing so we made a feature display of this particular tome, and I think it deserved to have a central display and also some information about the book, you know, what made it special, what were its key features and benefits, if you like. And I remember that the day after we'd done this, I think they sold more that day than they'd sold in the previous 6 months. So it really does work. So review the positioning of your key items. And if you've got a museum guide, then make sure it's got a more prominent display than perhaps the one on the right, and make sure that you've featured it around the shop and also on the desk itself. Thinking about signage, remember that the higher the sign, the simpler the message, and do design branded signs incorporating your museum logo. I would say generally avoid handwritten signs, but I know we've got Charleston in the room, and that's a very artistic setting, and I know that they have labels in beautiful handwritten, beautifully handwritten, so obviously it doesn't apply to them. Inform customers that their purchases support the work of the museum, and also perhaps put out some bestseller signs, because this demonstrates confidence in the product. You could think about book reviews. Ask one of your curators perhaps to review a book, or just simply take a publisher review from the back of a book, a bit like Waterstones do. Explain the connection of the product to the collection. You might know the connection, but perhaps your visitors wouldn't. And explain the provenance as well. If it's a locally sourced product perhaps, or a handmade product, tell a little bit about the local maker's details, include a short biography. And actually I think it's quite nice to give the customers a biography as well with a purchase, especially if it's a gift purchase. I think that's much appreciated. And I said at the beginning of the talk that hopefully it would remind some of you to make some small changes, and it's reminded me as well, because I've been meaning to do this at one of my shops for a while and I haven't got around to it, and now I will. So I think it's especially important at the moment to remind shoppers to shop local and to thank them for their support. As I said, there is a trend towards shopping local, and we want to encourage that as much as we can. if you're buying a range of textile products from different suppliers, you might want to think about ordering some branded swing tags, because if you then apply those to that range from different suppliers, it will bring some sort of cohesion to the range. And please do consider your labelling. I think it's so important. So if you're using a pricing gun, then just set some standards so that the labels are always positioned in the same place, perhaps on the bottom or back of the product on the bottom right, rather than a sort of scattergun approach, which I often find. And don't cover up the design with handwritten labels either. It'd be far better to just have a separate sign, perhaps with these key rings, rather than a sticker on each one. So that's that section. Any questions on that?
So we've got one that's popped up in the chat. Any thoughts on environmentally friendly packaging?
Yes, in terms of the packaging we're using, I definitely think that's important. I don't think we should be using plastic carrier bags anymore. I think we should all be using paper bags. Yeah, definitely.
So it's sourcing those sorts of things, and yeah, it being part of your brand almost, isn't it, to show that you're environmentally responsible.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to stretch to branded paper bags, which I know are expensive, what some people are doing is getting rubber stamps. So there's a company called, oh, it'll come to me, Blade Rubber, in London, and you can send off your logo and they'll send you, I think within about 48 hours, a rubber stamp, and you could brand your paper bags using that. That would be a cost-effective solution, I think, to going the branded route.
Mary, you had a follow on there, did you?
Follow on, yes. I think perhaps when doing the paper bags, perhaps I should stress that they're recyclable, and maybe introduce the colour green. It sort of goes with the green ecology, sort of, you know, bringing it home to people. When we've got to, you know, get some more supplies. I think we've all got a bit greener over COVID, and I know I'm very conscious of it. It's a possible idea.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, should we move on? I'm conscious we've sort of reached 20 past.
Okay, right. Okay, so product sourcing, thinking about right product. I think what we all need to do, if we haven't already done it, is really curate the range. So think about what makes your range unique. What's your brand? So I was at the Tate St Ives in August, and I noticed outside their shop they have this sign which says, "Our shop offers a unique range of gifts inspired by local landscapes and artists, and a large range of prints, art materials, art books, and art-inspired gifts and homewares." And yeah, everything in that shop fitted with that description. So I think we can all do that for ourselves. For instance, at St Barbe Museum in Lymington, we have a clear framework, so everything there fits in some way to do with our location, which is between the forest, the New Forest and the sea. So fantastic themes there. Also connects with the museum and our changing exhibition programme. And it's as simple as that. So yes, ensure that all your products are relevant to the display and interpretation spaces, and plan for your visitor demographic. Do remember though that grandparents buy gifts for grandchildren, so you might not get a lot of children coming to your site, but you will get visitors who might be interested in buying things for them. Do consider quality and value for money. I would say cheap doesn't always equal cheerful, and I'm thinking about those cheap toys with working parts, which as soon as the child's got home, they're broken. I think that's so disappointing and not something that we should be in the business of selling. And think about trends. What are people interested in? So I think, you know, Mary's already mentioned sustainability. I think that is important. I think, you know, for example, I've mentioned already, we're doing a big trade in products to do with bees and pollinators. So if that fits in with the theme of your museum, then that's a good one to try. And also there's a trend that home is sanctuary at the moment. I think more people are looking to really make their home a sanctuary. So I think if home type products are something that would work for you, that's a good one to go for. Think about products not available elsewhere on your high street, and develop a range in conjunction with local designers and makers, because they're a great source for not only making your offer unique, but you don't have to buy huge quantities either. The illustration on the right, I should credit, is an illustrator called Sean Stevens, who I work with ever such a lot in Lymington actually. She produces a range of fantastic, really affordable artwork. So she produces hand-painted cards for us that we sell for just £4.95, as well as framed works. But she also makes tea towels with these, and we send a lot of business her way, but she's one of our really precious suppliers. I think the great thing for us as museum shops, especially the ones today, the small medium museums, is that we're nimble. You know, we can really turn on and off our stock buying, change our product direction really quickly, and we can also shop local. I think a lot of the bigger shops can't do that. So for instance, again in Lymington, we compete with Waterstones, and Waterstones have stopped, certainly in that branch, stocking or buying more stocks of local books. So, you know, that's something that we can really provide for our shoppers. Think about trends. So the trends for recycled, environmentally friendly products are definitely on the increase. Fair trade and those handmade, locally sourced items are what will really make us stand out as being different. And also it supports the local economy, which is really important. So bespoke products, yeah, work with artists. If you can find local makers, that's even better. I think we've got Charleston in the room today, and I really should mention that they've just won the Museums and Heritage Award for their Created for Charleston range. They've done a fantastic job, clearly, with their bespoke handmade products. Other sorts of bespoke products, though, perhaps if we're thinking about more of a wholesale type product, then do order them in realistic quantities. So before you order 500 pens, think about how many that equates to a week, and whether, you know, perhaps that is realistic, or whether you'd be better off just buying a smaller quantity, even at a higher cost price. And you can work with local makers, often on a sale or return basis, which is a great way of being able to support those makers, but also to increase your stock package without having to invest in those products directly, which can be particularly helpful if they're a high price product and would use up all your your buying budget. I think it's very tempting when suppliers offer free carriage for buying a certain value of placing a certain order value, to go for that and try and buy to that level. But you know, really think twice before you do that in case you're overstocking. Use suppliers that consolidate ranges. I use BookSpeed a lot. They supply books from a variety of publishers, but also toys as well. So you can order stationery, toys, books, all from one supplier, which means that you can cut down on your admin time, but also it means you don't have to overcommit to stock. Think about every product you buy, where you're going to display it, and edit the order again and again. I always do this with every order. I look at it and think, you know, actually, do I need 2 of something, or sort of, you know, 2 cards with these, or should I just choose 1? 80% of sales come from 20% of the range. And do discuss the order, especially at the moment. Discuss the order and negotiate with the supplier. So I recently bought a range from the Home County Candle Company, and I think their minimum order was something like £350. I just didn't feel confident spending that on a product I hadn't tried before. And I asked them, you know, could I take, I think I just took six of 3 products in the end, and they were very happy to do that. After all, you know, it could lead to more orders for them. And yeah, again, an example, Chester Zoo in the webinar last week mentioned that they've streamlined their ranges and it hasn't really impacted on sales, again, because 80% of the sales come from 20% of the range. I use Pinterest quite a lot. I like creating a mood board of products. So this is a mood board I put together for a big textile exhibition in London last year. And I was trying to put together a range from about 10 different card suppliers, and just wanted to make sure it would all hang together well. And Pinterest is an invaluable tool for doing that. Sources of inspiration. A lot of the trade shows are now online, and Instagram's a great source for finding local makers as well. Look at national and small museum shops. Again, there's a lot of sharing in this sector. So I know, for instance, when I put together the exhibition for Sussex Modernism a few years ago, I went to Folly Farm and Charleston and Ditchling, and they were all very, very happy to share supplier details with me. So again, I think there's a lot about sharing in this sector. I subscribe to quite a number of magazines, but I do those through my local library. They have a free service called Press Reader. So, you know, I don't have to spend £25 a month on magazines. I get them free from my library. There are quite a lot of maker fairs. There's Made and Open Studios. There's the British Association for Fair Trade Suppliers as well. And yeah, other new trends. I think there's a trend for second-hand items. So I'm thinking, you know, about second-hand bookshops. I know a lot of museums already do this, just allocating perhaps one shelf to second-hand books on the theme of your museum. So the Garden Museum do this really well. They have a shelf at the opposite end to their book section, and it's a shelf for second-hand books, and they take thousands of pounds a year from just that shelf alone. And interesting enough, IKEA and COS are now promoting the sale of their own second-hand merchandise, which I think is a really interesting concept and one that we should keep an eye on as well. Shall I carry on to the next session, and then rather than stop Katrina?
Let me find out whether there are any burning questions.
Okay.
Any burning questions on product? No, I think we can move on, Alison. Thank you.
Okay. So next, just I've got a slide about promotions and then a slide about customer service. So think about what's the message you're trying to get across. Mary Portas, if you know her, she's the high street retail guru. She says that it's not about value, but values, which I think is important. You know, what does our shop stand for? I think setting up regular social media posting, so liaise with your marketing team, and there are so many opportunities for marketing, so whether that's through your museum website, your What's On guide, your social media, if there's a newsletter to volunteers perhaps, or your friends of the museum, signs in the exhibition spaces, if you're able to do that, to link shop products with exhibits. Think about external signs. Do you have a board outside which says that your shop's open and free to all? Make the most of perhaps the back of the loo doors. Have a sign promoting your shop products. Table toppers if you've got a cafe, and we've already mentioned carrier bags. And promote the fact that people can shop without the crowds at your museum, and that they're shopping local and supporting you. Customer service. This is Sue. Everyone needs a Sue. She's absolutely wonderful to see in action. She's smiley. She really knows the product as well. And yeah, Sue's on the shop floor at one of my museums, but we work together as a team, and she gets lots of free samples from suppliers, and she's able then to encourage visitors to buy those products because she's tried and tested them. She really listens to customers as well. So last week, a supplier actually came in to sell us something which we bought, which is a local leaflet to support our local church actually. But this visitor came in and ended up leaving having bought a book which she had no intention of buying, but Sue was very enthusiastic, and just by talking to her, actually finding out about where she lived, that led to a sale. So understand that selling means listening to the customer and suggesting suitable products, services and new selling. It acts as a deterrent to theft, definitely by having somebody on the shop floor as it were. Set targets for your team as well, and let them know how well you're doing selling perhaps your museum guidebook. Encourage upselling, and remember that when completing the sale, it creates a lasting impression and encourages repeat purchases. So at the end of our retail rainbow, I hope that you're going to find your pot of gold. And I just wanted to finish off by saying that, you know, retail is dynamic, and never more so than at the moment. And we're all facing challenges in our sector, but there are lots of resources out there. So there's the Association for Cultural Enterprises. If you don't already belong to it, I would encourage you to find out more about that. And there are other sites that you could look at. There's Essential Retail, and even the World Retail Congress, if you're as fascinated with retail as I am. And on that subject, again, Mary Portas, she's been talking recently about the kindness economy, which is about putting people at the heart of retail business. And I think that's something that we can all invest into. Thank you.
That's lovely, Alison. Thank you very much. Are you all right to sort of stay on and answer a few questions and things like that?
Yes, I'm fine.
Brilliant, brilliant. So I've got a few questions in the chat here, and if anybody else has got things, you're welcome to add to the chat or just sort of unmute at an appropriate time. So just a question, thinking about those customer service element and that sort of selling to customers as they come through the door. There was a question about if you've got less confident front of house sort of staff, would you recommend a script maybe to break the ice with visitors?
You could try a script, but I think it's really got to come from the heart, and people have got to do these things naturally. I think if you try and script something too much, then it comes across as being false. So I think it's just about perhaps giving the team members the confidence by knowing their product. So tell them about new lines. Perhaps if you get suppliers coming onto site, perhaps that might not happen as much at the moment, or letting those team members meet the suppliers, or even letting them help make the decisions about what to buy, or asking their opinion perhaps. So yeah, I think that's probably the better way to do it than actually script something. And ultimately it comes with, you learn that through trial and error, really. I suppose it's finding a way that they feel comfortable with it themselves.
Yeah, because it's about having that genuine, friendly conversation, isn't it?
It's got to be authentic. But yeah. I think, also that with selling, it's always had connotations of making somebody buy something they don't really want. Whereas what we're talking about is service, and it can be helping people make a decision. Perhaps if somebody goes in, they're looking for a gift for their granddaughter, who's 9, but they don't know what to buy, it can just be a case of the team member making a recommendation, or, I've played with this with my own 9-year-old, something as simple as that.
Yeah. Another little question just about mask wearing. Do we now need to wear masks in shops if you're behind a desk and a screen? I think my perception of that is yes, especially since you might be coming out from behind the desk and the screen actually to engage with customers.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
And obviously it can be a mask or it can be a visor is an option. Mary, did you have something else on that one?
Yes, I think in our museum, certainly the curator, and we have a lot of volunteers in Godalming, and Angela is in charge of them. They both wear visors in the museum, but we are only open 2 days a week, and I think you still have to book a slot because we are small is what we are. But I think selling the mask in the shop is an extremely good idea, because I've been caught out before now and failing to have it with me. And also, I think the volunteers behind the desk, not to give them a script, I'd quite agree with Alison there, but maybe if they could be given a few tips, because some of them always look so glum, and you just need them to just smile and just sort of look a bit more engaging. But I don't know
how you can teach that though.
I mean, some are so naturally, quite ebullient and very welcoming. But I've noticed others less so. But it's first impressions, isn't it, as you come in?
Yeah.
Yeah. We can but try.
Can but try. I've got a very specific question as well. Recommendations for a bespoke cuddly toy wholesaler. They've got a mummified rat, which is a favourite, so they'd like to make a soft toy of a rat.
Okay. I'm trying to think which museum this is. This rings a bell.
Sandwich.
Oh, okay.
So a plush rat is out of the price range, make the retail price point too high. So I guess.
Okay. Can I ask you to email me that question and I'll get back to you?
That's fine. I'll put Sandwich in touch with you.
My email address is there, if that helps.
Brilliant. And then somebody's just asked, we'll share the PowerPoint. So yes, we'll share the PowerPoint so that you can also use it with your teams. And maybe that's part of the solution, Mary, for just encouraging people to smile and welcome visitors and come out from behind the desk a little bit, because two features in the PowerPoint.
They're harder with a mask on.
You have to practice smiling with your eyes.
Smiling, yes.
Are there any other questions that anybody else has for Alison?
I've got a question for anybody that might want to answer it, actually. Thinking about online selling, I know some of your sites do sell online, and there's, from what I can gather, people are having a lot more success with selling online because the museums have been shut. And I wonder if anybody had any anecdotes about that. So I know, for instance, Farley's, you have an online website. Have you been selling more recently, have you noticed?
Yes, quite a lot more. And also with our Instagram account, we get a lot of people from all over the world ordering things as well. So our director was very busy during lockdown when we were all furloughed.
Okay, packing up the stock and going to the post office. Yeah.
We've had some of our best months of online sales through closure as well, and I think people have seen it as another way that they can support the museum while we're closed.
Yeah, that's really good to know.
Could I just ask, we're in the process of setting up an online shop, and do people generally separate their shop stock from their online stock and keep it that way? Does that keep things simpler?
Sorry, I'm not qualified to answer that because I have little experience in online selling, which was why I was asking the question, but perhaps somebody else could comment on that.
We don't have separate stock. It's the same thing. We have a more limited range available online just because it's, you want to make it look quite simple on the website, but we're looking at, because it's been doing so well, we're looking at adding more lines onto the website as well.
Okay.
Here at Ditchling, we similarly, we launched our online shop just before lockdown, so we did really well during lockdown with that. It's dropped off a bit now, but we're hoping it will pick up now for Christmas. And we manage to stock all at once, because otherwise it gets very tricky in terms of making sure you've got enough to sell.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll make the PowerPoint available and the recording as well, so you can use that with your colleagues who weren't able to make today. I want to say a really, really big thank you to Alison. That's been really useful, and I hope it's giving you some food for thought, particularly in these slightly tricky times. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, to think about actually what our planning is going to be in the short term, but also in the longer term as well. There are various resources also on the South East Museum Development Team's website, which Alison has put together, so I will send out the links for those as well, so you've got those kind of paper resources as well. Just a reminder that we'll be sending out an evaluation for the session, so please do complete it. And thank you very much. It's been lovely to see you all this morning, and thank you again, Alison.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thank you, Katrina, as well.
You're welcome.